The fundamental requirement for doing omnichannel advertising is to put the consumer first. The minute you get into a corporate structure, a company structure, where there's the search team over here and the television team over there and some other team doing other stuff, it becomes almost impossible to do omnichannel because each team is just trying to figure out how to optimize their particular channel and budget. So I think it's probably first and foremost that kind of organizational barrier that gets in the way. And then second of all, there's certainly some technology and data barriers that still need to be worked through. It begins with a very strategic layer that has representation of traditional and digital and television and online video, and probably also data and analytics. So that at a layer, there's a set of decisions and a set of budget allocations made from the idea of we're trying to achieve this omni-channel coverage. Then that develops in a set of campaign instructions and specifications that can then get passed off to channel specialists to execute. But by starting with that strategic layer, the individual pieces of it are operating within that omni-channel plan. And then the analytics comes in because you want to make sure as you're executing it, again, in a perfect world where you know reach and frequency, where you can start dialing down or dialing up different channels depending on how that reach and frequency curves are building. If you had the data set that you could really control all your media across all these channels, have total understanding of reach and frequency, the ability to potentially sequence messages rather than hit people with the same message over and over. That is like nirvana for a marketer. So once we get through the organizational barriers, now we got to straighten out the data problem. And there's a lot of people working on that, but that I think we're still pretty far away from having a reliable, scaled data set that gives that level of control to the marketer.
And Jim, a lot of changes during this pandemic, of course. Let's talk about ones that might reset our industry in a more positive way.
The biggest one is the upfront, which kind of didn't happen this year. And some brands, like a lot of the CPG categories, they're still doing fine, so they're still in a place to do that. But a lot of other brands and a lot of other categories, travel, autos, missing. So we've seen, we've heard for years and years, oh, the upfront is outmoded, it's obsolete, we don't need it anymore, blah, blah, blah. And very little has changed. So this year, this discontinuity we have with COVID forced some of these changes. And it remains to be seen, but assuming that the networks and the media companies see that the sky doesn't fall on them, they're still able to sell their inventory, they're still able to make a good profit for their shareholders and investors, then there'll be less sort of pressure for them next year to say, no, we got to go back to a traditional upfront. And I think that ties in with the change we're going through in terms of audience-based buying and in terms of convergence of traditional linear and OTT. Because when you start going down that path, you don't necessarily want that schedule locked in months and months in advance. You want some degree of flexibility and ability to shift money and ability to shift some of your strategy as the campaign and as the year goes on. So a lot more of that has been baked into any upfront agreements that have been reached this year. And again, I think the media companies will learn from that experience that, it still is okay with their business model. They're still able to meet, their financial goals. And so, while, they probably want a little more, control and a little more commitment up front than they got this year. I think there'll be less incentive or less pressure for them to go back to the old kind of, let's lock in all of these commitments, these months in advance.